The state's only geothermal energy plant shut down last year when Kīlauea Volcano erupted in Lower Puna on the Big Island. The eruption damaged the plant while destroying hundreds of homes and farms. Puna Geothermal Venture wants to be operational again by the end of this year. Critics call that timetable ambitious and question the cost. Should Puna Geothermal restart? Join the conversation. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Yenji Denise. Puna Geothermal Venture was supplying almost 30% of the Big Island's electrical power until it closed a year ago this month. That's when Kīlauea erupted in Lower Puna. 24 fissures opened, sending lava over homes, farms, businesses, roads, and treasured shoreline areas. Although Puna Geothermal was damaged by lava, it was largely spared, with most of the plant remaining intact. The company that owns the plant wants to reopen it by the end of the year. Some question whether it should reopen at all. Tonight we'll hear from a PGV representative, an environmental activist, the electric company, and the state senator who represents Puna District. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and on the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Michael Kalikini is the Senior Director for Hawaii Affairs at Puna Geothermal Venture. He's been with PGV for more than 27 years. Henry Curtis is the Vice President of two environmental organizations, Life of the Land and Puna Pono Alliance. He's been involved in utility proceedings for the last 23 years. Scott Siu is the Senior Vice President of Public Affairs for Hawaiian Electric Company. He's served in many leadership positions at HECO since 1993. And Russell Ruderman is the state senator who represents all of the District of Puna and parts of Ka'u. He's been in the Senate since 2012. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Welcome to all of you. Michael, I want to start with you. Tell us the state of the plant right now. We did mention that some of it was damaged, but largely intact. Tell us what it would take to get it up and running again.
Correct. So the eruption covered up the substation, and it covered up parts of our well field. So we had 3 geothermal wells that got covered by the lava. And of course, you had the lava surrounding the facility. So what we did is we got permission and permits to build the driveway back to the location. And we are currently doing the grading and grubbing to restore the substation and also the well field.
And I know that at the time, some of the wells were purposefully plugged up. What does it take to actually reopen those?
So we've got our crews working on those wells. Those are drilling folks from ORMAT. And it requires a rig and special tools, and it's the plugs that was installed is used in the industry for maintenance purposes.
Okay.
So we're currently removing those plugs.
30% of the island's power is quite a bit. What did you do in the interim? How did you make up for that, and how important is this energy source?
Well, it does provide a lot of energy to the Big Island. But thankfully, we have other power plants and other power sources on the island. So ever since the PGV plant shut down, we've been able to provide for the island's energy needs. We do recognize, though, that it changed the mix of our system. So as we've had to operate other power plants more often, it's caused us to have to change our maintenance schedules. It's caused us to have to have additional shift staffing at some of the plants and so on. So it's definitely caused us to have to change our operations a bit.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I know that you have reservations about this reopening. What are your concerns?
When the HELCO contract was signed with PGV, that had to get Public Utility Commission approval. But the question is, how do you monitor the conditions of the contract? How do you look at health issues? How do you look at air issues? How do you deal with the community? It seems that nobody wants to monitor it or enforce it or verify it. The community is just left hanging. So we actually have a contested case proceeding, Puna Pono Alliance, before the Department of Health, focusing on the air permit. And the state believes that a 5-year permit that expires is good forever until they decide to reconsider it.
What are your specific concerns about the air quality?
We want source monitoring. Instead of having a few scattered places that look at what's in the air, we want to have a real understanding of what's coming out of the stack at Puna Geothermal Venture.
I know that you've been active on this issue for some time. What are you hearing from your constituents? How do we balance the needs for energy with the concern that he's talking about?
Well, there's a lot of concern about, not so much about PGV reopening, but about it reopening in a hurry before due diligence has been done to reassess the current situation. It's obvious that the geology underneath us has changed. Lava flowed through this well field, and the physical environment has changed dramatically, which ought to trigger a review of the environmental impact statement, a need for either a review or a supplemental impact statement, because that's a major change to a very significant facility. As for the need for the power, we as consumers don't feel that need. Helco assured us in the very first week that they could be okay without it. Since then, and possibly because of this, we've signed 2 agreements for 2 major utility-scale solar plants with battery backup, which we hadn't had on the Big Island before. I think it's partly because PGV went offline and we wanted to restore the renewable portion of our portfolio. So now we have 2 major solar plants coming online next year at a much, much lower cost. So if we don't need the electricity, if PGV comes back online with its current contract, we will be paying more than if they don't come back online. So we don't feel the need for it. We don't know whether it's wise for the ratepayers, but most importantly, it was a dangerous situation before that was very poorly monitored. Now it's much more dangerous with many more unknowns, and we think that logic and sanity would dictate that we understand what's going on in the newly revised, geology underneath it before we start drilling and to potential catastrophes.
How do you answer that?
Well, those are valid concerns, and we take those requirements as far as the change in the geology seriously. We've done surveys on some of our geothermal wells, and like I mentioned earlier, we're removing the plugs to assess the changes or the current conditions. And so that's something that we're very, very serious, and safety is number one. It'll be number one going forward. Now, we do know that there is a change in the resource. There's actually more heat there, and it makes sense because of the eruption and the lava beneath the rift zone. But we haven't noticed so far that it's anywhere near what the original condition of the field was back in 1991, 1992 timeframe.
He's talking about doing a whole new environmental impact statement. Obviously, that's costly and it would be time consuming. Do you have what would be your reservations to engaging in something like that?
Well, if an EIS is required, we definitely would do it. We definitely would. And, I understand the landscape has changed. We've had some preliminary discussions with different agencies on the requirement for an EIS. And so far, we have not come across any regulatory requirement to perform one. But that's definitely not out of the picture.
Okay. He brought up 2 power plants. Tell us about, or 2 energy sources, rather. Tell us about that and how that changes the mix.
Yeah, let me start here, which is, right now we have a mixture of different power generation sources on the Big Island, right? We have traditional fossil fuel power plants. We have the wind farms up in Hawai'i, South Point, and of course we have PGV. So as we are
hydro.
And hydro, we have some inline hydro plants as well on the island. Significant amounts of customer rooftop solar as well. When we are charting our course forward, right, we have a mandate that we have to get off of the fossil fuel by 2045. So we are really looking towards procuring as aggressively as we can additional renewable energy. So what the Senator referred to is the outcome of our first RFP, which was started over a year ago. And that's leading to these projects that are now being contracted for, and PUC has really fast-paced the approval of some of these contracts. So that's a tremendously positive advancement. We are already gearing up for a second phase of the RFP, and we are also going to be pretty aggressive across every single island. One of the things that I always think about, though, is that when we're going forward, we will need to have a portfolio of different types of renewable power generation. And it will be a significant amount of probably PV or solar photovoltaics plus battery storage systems. Those are, as the Senator said, we're very happy seeing the pricing coming in on some of those projects. But yet, as a former system operator, I don't think that we will be able to have an entire energy system that entirely relies on solar and battery. We have to have a mix of other generation sources that can provide power 24 hours, 24/7. So I think that while we are very happy at having these 2 solar farms coming online pretty soon, and hopefully even more in the future, we will always need that mixture, firm generation sources, firm renewable generation sources. So I just wanted to flag that. The cost of these new contracts are very attractive, no doubt. One of the things that we are very focused on is working with Mike, working with PGV to see about renegotiating the contract that we purchased their power. Our goal is to lower the cost of that contract. So I don't want to put Mike on the spot, but that's our expectation. And our PUC has expressed very clearly that they would like to see the contract delinked from fossil fuel costs, bring it down to a level that's competitive with other renewable sources. So that's what we're currently in negotiation.
And if that were to happen, how soon could that happen? When would that rate change?
Well, so the process would be that we negotiate, we hopefully come to some agreement, we file that application for the amended contract to the Public Utilities Commission, and they would review it and hopefully approve it. As soon as they render the approval, that's when the new rates would go into effect. One of the things that the PUC has expressed in a letter to us just the other week was that they would like us to move forward on those negotiations, hopefully so that we could achieve some agreement and file an amended contract to the PUC prior to the PGV plant coming back online. It might be aggressive, but that's what we're going to shoot for.
Is that realistic?
You know, we've actually dealt with an expansion project in 2010 to 2012, and it actually, from the time that an agreement was reached between HELCO and PGV, it took about a year for the PUC to get back on the approval. You know, so there's going to be some time, but I mean, if the new commission and a sense of urgency to get more contracts that will benefit ratepayers, it could go quicker.
Yeah. One thing to point out, we actually started these discussions about amending the contract even before the lava impacted the plant. So it's definitely something we've been working on.
Yeah, and I wanted to also clarify, so even I mentioned to the Senator's point about the cost of our energy. So in the 2011 timeframe when we did the 8 megawatt expansion, we actually delinked portions of our contract, and which resulted in the lowest cost energy as low as 6 cents. You know, but however, we do have portions that are still tied to oil, and that's what we were discussing before the eruption, and that's what we've started off continuing with those discussions.
Of course, we welcome your audience questions. We have folks standing by the phones and monitoring our social media. Matt from Kahala writes in today, why are we not expanding geothermal in the state since it's so environmentally friendly? Is this an environmentally friendly source of power?
First, let's point out that there's only one place in the world that exceeds 30% of its electricity from renewables. Most people would not think of the country. It's Kenya. There are only a few countries that exceed 10%, even if you count Hawai'i Island. It's Iceland, El Salvador, a few places that exceed 10%. So the 30% on the Big Island was exceptional. But if you look at the Big Island, it's fairly big. 60% of the load, 60% of the supply is on the east side of the island. 60% of the demand is on the west side of the island. The west side is growing. It has some of the finest wind in the entire state. The Waikoloa Kohala area could produce enough power from wind to power all of the electricity of the state. The Kona side has fantastic solar. So by shutting down PGV and moving resources to the west side, you're not only dealing with generation, you're dealing with the transmission lines. And since we know hurricanes are coming, and when Iselle hit, it really whacked Puna. So having generation much closer to where you need it is critical in the resilience of the system.
Do you think that this should be never put back online? Should this be part of the energy mix on the Big Island?
If it comes back, they should really deal with the health impacts and the air impacts, and there should be a way of getting community involvement. It can't be that the community is cut out of the process.
Do you feel the community's been cut out of the process?
Oh, absolutely, and my whole community feels that way. We've been mistreated and given misinformation for 30 years. We never find out when there's a hazard until we alert ourselves. But let me just stress, your caller mentioned it's so environmentally friendly, shouldn't we grow it? No one in the vicinity of PGV would call it environmentally friendly. You can track the attitude towards geothermal as a function of distance from the plant, and it's a very clear correlation because they've had experience with evacuations, with blowouts, with poison gas in the air. So the fellow that thinks it's environmental has the quality of no direct experience with geothermal in Hawaii that my community doesn't have. We all want renewable energy. No one wants it more than me. But I would divide renewable energy resources into those that are safe and reliable and those that are hazardous. And I think we all would agree that safe, reliable renewables are the way we should go. Geothermal here in Hawaii has had a horrible track record of safety from the community point of view and from an environmental point of view. There's been serious health effects. There's been people sent to the hospital. Henry mentioned Iselle. I mean, I'd like at some point to talk about what happened during Iselle, which was during the hurricane, there was an uncontrolled release at the plant. And we can talk about whose fault that was, but the effect of it was a cloud of poisonous gas in the neighborhood. Civil defense came on the radio and said, if you feel uncomfortable, please evacuate yourselves. But evacuation was physically impossible. Every single road in the area was blocked by fallen albizia trees. So you have people that were smelling hydrogen sulfide in their home, that were getting sick. More than 12 were knocked unconscious, and they physically could not evacuate. This is an impossible situation. I believe a lawsuit was just settled in the last few weeks about some of the people who went to the hospital during that time. But this is an example of, solar plants don't cause people to go to the hospital. This happened in our community through no fault of anybody living there, and it showed the extreme hazards of this situation where a hurricane comes by, the power plant goes down, we can't evacuate, a poison gas release happens, and people get made ill. It was a very serious situation.
So is your view that this should just not be part of the mix at all?
That is my view because of my direct experience and my community's experience with it. Geothermal is great in theory. It's wonderful in theory. The reality of it in Hawaii is an entirely different animal because we have an unstable, constantly changing resource that's much more poisonous and much hotter and more corrosive than resources elsewhere in the world. So we have hazards that come along with it that don't exist in other places where we have geothermal.
And that's critical because geothermal in different places of the world is different. Some of it is steam that comes straight up. Some of it is water that comes up, hot water. Some, like in Puna, you have to inject water in to create the steam. In a few places, they're now experimenting with fracking. So geothermal is very different in the technology, and it's also very different in the mineral composition of what's there. And so you can't simply look at Puna and look at Iceland and say they're identical. They're not.
Those are some pretty serious criticisms. I want to give you an opportunity to answer them.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And first of all, starting from Henry's point, Puna does not inject water to create the steam and the geothermal fluids to come back. It's already naturally occurring steam and hot water. And we go down and we drill and then we tap into those areas. You really need three key elements to be successful in geothermal. You need heat, you need permeability, and you need water. That all exists below at our location. So just to correct on that. And then I wanted to also point out a few things what Senator mentioned. So we talked about Isel, for example, an uncontrolled release. I want to clarify, it was a mechanical piece of equipment. It was a pressure relief valve that was stuck open for less than an hour or so. So what had happened is the emissions of hydrogen sulfide, which we calculated was less than 100 pounds. And as the Senator noted, there were quite a few people who said they passed out and they got sick. And we myself and our company, we cannot say or determine what those allegations are because we're not medical experts. But I can say we had 7 people on location during the night of Isel. We in fact had 2 women who were wives of employees that were afraid because they lived along the coastline that was on location, and none of them got ill. Okay, so 100 pounds of H2S during that event. During the eruption, every day, sulfur dioxide, which is considered 5 times more hazardous than H2S, there was 60 million pounds per day. There was no reports from people in the area about getting ill or adverse health effects. So that's some of the things I think that need to be taken into account.
Well, sulfur dioxide's hazard level is measured in parts per million, and hydrogen sulfide, which is what comes out of your uncontrolled releases, is measured in parts per billion.
We are regulated in parts per billion. If you look at the county website, the hazard levels are in parts per million. For example, for sulfur dioxide, the hazard level is 2 parts per million, and the hazard level for hydrogen sulfide is 10 parts per million. It's on there, and EPA has the guidelines. So that's something to take into account about the situation.
But wind does not follow a direct path. Wind goes in all kinds of strange ways. And if you're not measuring, there just goes, you can't simply say this amount is bigger than this amount, and the wind patterns can be different. It can affect different communities in different ways.
William writes via email, in 1987, the PGV EIS was prepared voluntarily and needs to be updated. Why not voluntarily do it instead of waiting for it to be required by the court?
Yes, we'll take that under consideration.
Okay. And Sandy wants to know, and maybe you can answer this, did the eruptions occur along the same line where geothermal drilled its wells? How close did the eruption actually happen to where the wells were drilled?
So the eruptions, the majority of the fissures during this 2008 eruption was located to the south of us. But in 1955, the eruption back then occurred in line where the facility is located. And 1960 was also in Kapoho. And that's it's on the rift zone. It's just a matter of time when the next eruption is going to occur.
Well, and to that point, I mean, we can't predict the volcano, but I read recently that they think within 10 years there could be a similar eruption. Looking at that, is it wise to restart the plant given that we could have another eruption in the same area and perhaps wiping it out and causing other harm?
No, that's a good question, and ORMAT, the parent company of Puna Geothermal Venture, we are a renewable energy company, and one of our expertise is geothermal development. We got to have the courage, right, to understand the risks. You got to have the courage, the commitment to be able to develop a facility such as PGV in a rift zone. Now, this is not the only geothermal plant that's on a similar type location. We have plants like this in the Philippines. We have them in Indonesia, Kenya. We also have plants in there. We've experienced volcanic eruptions near our plants, cleaned them off and bring them back on. Even going back to Isel, the plant didn't trip offline. We had, because of the plant equipment, the transmission lines got knocked down with the wind and the farm and all of that. So We take risks seriously, and you know, this resource has been a very good resource. We've been there over 25 years. And we designed the wells in such a way, if an eruption or a lava flow came nearby, that we could help mitigate certain aspects by being able to preserve the wells, which is what we did. You know, we covered our well, we dismantled the surface piping, we covered it with cinders, the lava came over, and now we would go back and recover them.
What would be an option that you would accept? I mean, how can this plant, if this is going to be part of the mix, how can it be the neighbor that you want it to be?
Well, the very first step would require a review of the changed situation. We have a different situation underground in terms of the geology, the lava. They're going to hit lava when they drill now that came out last year. It's much hotter, much more fluid than what was down there before. There's a much greater danger than ever before. We don't have evacuation roads. We don't have roads for emergency response to get in. We don't have roads for the community to get out. If they hit an unexpected water pocket next week, there's a group of residents that are relying on their road as the only way out. What are they going to do? That same event caused a blowout in 1991 that went uncontrolled for 30 hours. What are people going to do now that we don't have a road? So the very first thing that needs to be done is a review of the EIS and determine whether a supplemental or new EIS is required because of the changed situation in the area, which is dramatic. The other thing, this is even before the lava flow last year, if for any community to feel safe around this facility would require some serious air monitoring systems, which have never been in place. We only have an air sampling system, which the company contracts for and does its self-reporting on. I'll give you another example of what happened during Isel. But during Isel, that sampling system went down because the power was out. So Mike mentioned a number of how much pounds were released. It's much less than what's been estimated in the community. We estimated 300 pounds per hour, but there's no way to know because the only sampling system was offline. And while that sampling system was offline, PGV went ahead after they controlled the release, they did a well clean out, which is a very dirty and hazardous process. They did it while the air samplers were conveniently offline. We have no idea how much hydrogen sulfide was released then either. So, and it's an abuse of the community. The Department of Health would have to step up to its responsibility to have real air monitoring. It ought to be a source permit like any other situation in the world, not a randomly located sampler on some hillside somewhere that may or may not get a waft of whatever just came out. It needs to be monitored at the source, there needs to be alert systems, and that needs to be taken seriously, which has never happened. And DLNR needs to be serious about the idea that no new permits or research needs to be done before they can re-drill wells is insane. They need to get serious about what's changed down there before they go and do drilling of more wells. I'll be brief. I want to add one more thing. Originally, I remember when PGV came online, as I recall, there was going to be 3 wells, 2 production wells, 1 re-injection. Right now we have, what, 12, 14 wells?
11.
11, thank you. Because so many wells have failed. The integrity of the wells is not stable in that area. It's a very seismically active area, even before the lava flow. And now we have no idea what's going on down there.
What's ECO's position on all of this?
You know, we buy the power from PGV, and as I mentioned before, you know, we are a customer of theirs. We take that energy and we distribute it to all of our customers in the Big Island. We are really reliant on PGV and our other providers to manage their operations, meet all the environmental requirements and such. We also those communities are our customers as well, so we're very sensitive to the issues that are happening all across the island. at the end of the day, what we are looking for is we need reliable, we want clean sources of energy, and we're also trying to manage the bills down for the customers. So it may sound like I'm a little bit far removed from the specific issues that are being talked about. We're keeping track of it. Ultimately, what we need to see is that whoever is providing power to us, that they are sustainable, that they're viable, so that we can build our plans around them.
Absent having to do a full EIS and go through that re-permitting, how soon, let's say all the green lights were given, how soon could you be back up and running?
Well, our goal is to return back to operation before year end. That's our goal. So that's what we're focused on. That's what we're concentrating on in terms of restoring substation, transmission, and overhauling the equipment, because the emissions from the eruption really did a lot of damage. It was very corrosive environment to be in.
I know you've rebuilt the road there now. How easy or difficult is it for your workers to actually get in there and do the work?
So it's we refer to it as a pioneer road. It's built over the lava, and like Senator mentioned, we also have that access to the nearby community. But prior to that, we were flying in. The whole facility is surrounded by lava. There's very few homes that are surrounding us. There's 2 on Highway 132, but then we have over 250 residents that are going back home to the east of us through our driveway.
Okay. Someone from Pahoa writing in wants to know how many of the residents living near the plant moved after the plant was first built. I don't know if you would necessarily know that. And I'm actually curious to know, since the eruption happened, what the population shift is in that area as well.
I don't have the exact number. There was a buyout program in the early years. I don't know the exact number. I think it's in the dozens. It's not a massive amount. Well, we lost a lot of population during the eruption, but I think Mike is trying to paint the picture of there's few people that are under a hazard now because so many homes are gone, but I would dispute that because of the vegetation has been completely destroyed in the area. The nuisance from sound and from toxic emissions now will extend in a much larger area than it ever did before, and include group populations that haven't been analyzed. So there's still people there that would be affected by blowouts or noise or nuisance, in some ways worse than before. Obviously, yes, there's a lot fewer people living close to the plant, but that's a curious thing to me. That's small comfort. When you look at the picture from the air of a geothermal power plant surrounded on 3.5 sides by lava, and you think it could happen again next year, it could happen against 10 years. Is this really a logical or safe or prudent place to put expensive, critical, hazardous infrastructure? If you just look at that picture, I personally believe there's some higher up in ORMAT or this company that's going to look at this picture and say, no, we're not going to invest another $10 or $20 million in this location.
But they're already working on it, so
sure,
my guess
we're doing it. I mean, we're
Yeah.
a private company, and the repairs, it's not going to be passed on to ratepayers. So it's a conscientious, decision that ORMAT PGV has embarked on, and I agree with the senator. The landscape has changed. Noise, emissions, it'll be a different situation, right? But in the end, we need to comply with Department of Health. We need to comply with DLNR. We need to comply with the county permits, and we're going to do that. And like I said, safety is our #1 priority. It'll always be that. And we look at it, if we keep our employees safe, what that translates to is that folks around nearby us, they'll be safe too.
He's saying that, hopefully they're online by the end of the year. What resources do you have to maybe halt the brakes on that? What can you do now?
Oh, it's not my job to halt the brakes on it. I believe it was an unrealistic statement from the very first time they said it. That is to say, and Mike and PGV has said they don't foresee any real obstacles. I find that patently unbelievable. I mean, we didn't know about some of these regulatory requirements. There's the transmission line, possibly the contract, and what about the smoldering power poles. I mean, this was an obstacle we didn't know about 2 weeks ago. Do we really think there'll be no other surprises? And shouldn't we do a comprehensive study of the current situation so that smoldering power poles will be the smallest surprise we get? You know, I think the idea that they're going to be back online at the end of the year is preposterous no matter what I say or do. It's just not physically or legally possible. That's just my opinion. So we'll see. But if Mike is so committed to safety, then what is the rush? Why is it prudent to hurry this thing back online when there are so many serious questions relating to the power plant safety and the community safety around it? Why are we in a hurry? Why ought we not to take 6 months or 12 months to do this right if safety is our number one concern?
Well, 30% of the island's power would be the rush, wouldn't it?
No, it's not,
No.
because our power is fine, and 2 much cheaper solar plants are coming online next
If
year.
it's okay to continue burning more oil,
Until next year when the 2
but-
solar plants come online, you mean?
yeah, and no, right now.
Well, that's all. Well,
currently.
that's all, 1 year of that.
The
right?
second round of the request for proposals is underway. HECO is arranging to get new solar on Molokai, Lanai, Oahu, and Maui. And they have suggested that what happens with Huhonua and what happens with PGV may affect the need to put new solar in on Hawaii Island. And so they're putting into the RFP that they want developers to suggest renewable energy alternatives for the Big Island, additional ones. So it's not a question of if we get rid of geothermal, we don't have enough renewables. We have enough renewables on the Big Island, so we don't need anything else.
Well,
I wanna let you jump
I
in
would
on that,
respond to that, Henry. We are going forward with our RFP, our Stage 2 RFP, and we are definitely working with that contingency. What if Huhonua does not actually get built or come online? What if PGV is unable to come back online? So that's what we're covering in that RFP. So it's still early. We haven't actually issued that RFP yet, so we still have to go through that process and actually get those.
But it's
contracts.
like July that you're going to release it or something in that time frame.
It'll be released in this year.
I mean, what is filling the gap? What is making up for that 30% right now?
Well, right now we're running our other power plants more often than we used to. So that's actually, unfortunately, it's translated to us burning more fossil fuel. It has actually raised our customers' bills by probably about something on the order of a couple bucks a month. So that is where we are right now. But we are hoping to get PV, solar and battery projects online next year, so that'll help manage the issue.
And to clarify, in your second round of RFP, you said that Lanai and Molokai would come after the other islands, and you expect to put that RFP out in October and November. So this one is fairly before October.
Well, we are working on the details of the RFPs, definitely. And whether it's a month here or there, it's going to happen this year.
And,
So it
and
sounds
we're
like
part of
in
that.
a way both are true, right?
Yes.
That you are burning more fossil fuels by necessity, but that there will be more renewables hopefully at some point in the future.
And our position is actually we should be moving much faster to renewables. We should be going to 100% by 2030. So we would jump the gun on HECO. And HECO pointed out earlier in the show that we have a goal of 2045 of 100%. That's 100% RPS. It's not 100% renewables. And HECO answered one of Lifeland's information requests a few years ago, pointing out that the grid can be 35% renewable and have an RPS of 115%.
So Henry, this is one of Henry's favorite issues he loves to raise. So the bottom line is we interpret our requirement to be completely off of fossil fuel, no matter what, by 2045. If we can get there sooner, faster, we're going to do that. So yes, the math of the RPS and the state law allows for some double counting, and theoretically, yes, you could still have fossil fuel online and check the box that you said that we're at 100% RPS, but we're not doing that.
And we
So
we
for the
What's
record,
RPS, just to
renewable
Portfolio Standard.
Okay.
We're going to be off of fossil fuel.
So we accept that they recognize there's a double standard, but we think they are still taking too long to switch to renewables.
I mean, wouldn't you say, though, that geothermal is a renewable energy source, or do you dispute that?
It's interesting because if you look at the science of it, all matter in the universe can't be created or destroyed, so how can something be renewable? So renewable is actually not a scientific definition, it's a political definition, and every state and every country defines it differently. So yes, geothermal can be renewable if it's in your definition, and it doesn't have to be. In our state definition, you could chop down the Amazon rainforest and fly it to Hawaii, and that would be renewable energy under state law.
Okay, but in the conversation that we're having now, a lot of people would say that this is a clean energy source.
And they would say it, but how many of them have analyzed how clean it is? We passed, for example, the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative in 2008, but the state didn't define clean until 2013. So we can put out a lot of fancy words like clean. Clean was put out simply because it sounds nice. Who wants dirty energy?
You can define clean a number of different ways, right? Some can say it's renewable energy. Other states, other areas have focused on carbon, right? Decarbonization as the measure. Greenhouse gases is another way to look at these different energy sources. I'm still just myself coming up to speed on what life cycle analysis means for calculating greenhouse gas emissions, but based on some of the information I've seen, geothermal on a life cycle analysis basis is about equivalent to some of the solar farms, at least certain types of geothermal plants. And that's mostly because when you are actually manufacturing the components and building the plants, that's contributing to the greenhouse gases.
We would agree with that.
But once you're actually in operation, depending on the type of geothermal plant, if it's a closed system, for example, then you will not actually have generation of greenhouse gases.
We agree with that.
I mean, we've heard a lot of criticisms of the energy, but tell us why you contend it's a green energy source.
Well, we're not burning fossil fuels, and we truly believe it's a renewable resource. All of the heat that comes up that is generating electricity, the cooler fluids are then re-injected back into the earth. And over time, it'll regain some heat and ultimately return back to the surface. But I do want to comment on Henry's mention about let's push forward with more solar and battery systems. We love all different renewable resources, solar, batteries, etc. But we need to remember that geothermal provides very important services for grid support. We have ancillary services, and we're 24/7. So that's the big thing. Like these new projects coming on, which we support. What do they have? 4 hour, 30 megawatts, 120 megawatt hours per day. So what do you do when there's no sun? What do you do when there's no wind?
Two
That's
30
the difference.
megawatt plants, each of which has 120 megawatts of storage capacity. So
120 megawatt hours.
120 megawatt hours, just of these first two. My point is that solar with battery storage is also firm power. It's just a matter of how much battery storage you need.
Yeah.
This wasn't true 2 to 5 years ago because batteries weren't cheap enough, but it is now.
Yep.
Well, there are other sources of firm power that don't
If
have
I can
to.
speak as a former system operator. The technology and the cost right now for energy storage, it's coming down, definitely. So that's a good thing. And so we're seeing some of that in these contracts that we're able to secure now. But as far as being able to operate an electric system round the clock 24/7, we will not be able to rely on the current technology of what this energy storage, because we simply cannot afford it. It would be way too expensive to have just a solar battery powered energy system. We're hopeful that the cost will continue to come down, and definitely there is going to be a huge piece of the puzzle that is provided by energy storage. But we will have to have a diverse set of generation sources. So I keep saying whatever that firm renewable power source is, it's got to be clean, it's got to be affordable, and it's got to be reliable and resilient.
Should it be safe to the neighbors?
It should
too?
be safe too.
Thank you. That would be an
Oh,
important thing to keep in mind.
Definitely
from my
needs to be
community's point
safe.
of
I
view,
think all of us
which
do.
has been ignored for 30 years from my community's point of view. So please keep that in your criteria.
And we have one of the best, most efficient wind facility in the world on the Big Island.
I want to get some more callers in here. Wesley in Kahala wants to know, why would an energy developer do business with Hawaiian Electric if they renegotiate long-term contracts when a cheaper bidder comes along? I mean, how likely are these folks willing to renegotiate that price that you talked about earlier?
It's a mutual agreement that we would have to come to. We have an existing contract in place already, and it is still in effect. A number of years ago, we actually did inquire with not only PGV, but a number of the other contracted energy providers to see if they would be willing to reopen the contracts and actually renegotiate to break the link with fossil fuel. At that time, PGV declined the offer. Different today, because Mike and PGV, they actually have said, yes, we're willing to come to the table and reopen the contract. So they are seeking a more firm idea of what the energy pricing will be over the term of the contract. We are obviously looking to reduce the cost for our customers. So it is a mutual agreement.
The contract runs out, and part of the deal would be to extend the contract. So that would be the gain for PGV.
Right. Current contract runs through 2027.
So that's what's in it for you.
That's what's in it for us.
Okay, we have some questions here. Roger on Lanai wants to know, would Mr. Kalikini move his family to the area of the PGV plant? I mean, I think the senator has pointed to a number of health concerns. How do you feel about the safety of the plant?
Yeah, I've taken my grandchildren to the plant numerous times. Would I live nearby? Definitely. Yeah, I would have no safety concerns personally.
Okay, we want to get to more of these. Doug in Honolulu asks if the senator has referred to the area being hazardous to the local community. If that's true, why are residents able to build homes and Puna Geothermal able to build a plant? I mean, there is a larger question as to whether that area should be redeveloped at all.
Well, that's a question from the past, because we've been permitting homes there for 50, 75 years. And then we allowed the geothermal plant to come in. So that's a planning question. I don't think it was a great decision back then, and I can't defend that decision.
What is the cheapest form of renewable energy? That's a question for you.
Well, what's setting the standard right now are these PV battery contracts that we're getting. I mean, and they are, anywhere from 8 cents per kilowatt hour. But again, not all renewable energy is the same, right? PV battery will be a firm source of power for the duration that the battery is able to provide that firm power source. But once that battery is discharged, at that point, we don't have that as a resource. So it's one thing to ask the question, what's the cheapest? But the different types of power sources perform different functions.
This caller says, what do you know about the negative effects reportedly associated with wind power? I mean, I think with any one of these sources, there's going to be some downside, correct? There is some environmental impact no matter what, whether it's manufacturing the solar panels. We know that wind power, of course, can affect bats here in Hawaii and birds and things like that. I mean, there's sort of none of this is without consequence.
Right, and one thing often not thought about is a wind turbine can be knocked over unless you dig a giant hole and fill it with cement and concrete. And cement is the third leading greenhouse gas emitter in the world after fossil fuels and agriculture. So there are positives and negatives for all. And Life of the Land's position is there is a positive and negative political, economic, social, cultural, and greenhouse gas with every resource. And therefore you have to compare them. You have to use life cycle analysis. You have to see how they fit together and that's why we get heavily involved in numerous working groups with HECO on charting the future.
Andy via email says the senator is absolutely not accurately representing many of his constituency. I live very close to PGV and have never been adversely affected by the plant. His statements are bordering on outright lies. That's a pretty strong statement from Andy here. You know, do you hear people in your community who also support this venture?
Oh, there are a few. But mostly they're people who haven't had a long time experience living there. No one that was there for the blowout in '91 or for the blowout during a cell. Nobody feels that way who's lived with it for a long time. Of course, there's a whole range of opinions in any group of people. If you draw a circle of a mile or two around PGV and test it for attitudes, you'd find 90% opposition.
How do you move forward on this? Obviously, the two of you are at pretty much an impasse. What happens now?
Well, what I would like to see happen is an objective review of the changed situation. I hate to keep repeating that, but it's very, very different now, and we have to analyze it from a physical and a safety point of view. If I could add one thing that hasn't been part of this discussion before, I'll do it as briefly as I can. And I'm going to be highly criticized for saying this. I believe that before we go forward, we should have a real analysis of whether there was any relationship between the 30 years of injection of fluid that they've been doing and the location and the intensity of last year's eruption. It has not been disproven that those two are related. What we saw was an eruption that was unlike any we've seen before, much hotter, much more fluid, much more fast-moving, with 24 fissures erupting in an area within about a mile of PGV. There's a 20-mile rift zone. If you just did a probability analysis, what's the chances that 24 fissures erupt within a mile of PGV by coincidence? That probability is 1 in a million. And we have had a lot of research on the effects of fracking, of which fluid reinjection is a form of fracking. And just this month, a study from Tufts University came out showing that fracking, including fluid injection, causes seismicity, earthquakes, and fractures for miles around it. They've been doing this, and we see a line of fissures right along their property line. Aren't we going to, are we really going to move forward before answering the question, did this activity contribute at all to the nature and the intensity of last year's eruption? I believe that question needs to be answered before we go forward.
And who can answer that question?
An objective geologist.
I can help out. So the USGS actually responded to what you're just saying. For me, it's totally, with all due respect, it's absurd that PGV had any contribution to this eruption. And the scientist in charge, Ms. Tina Neal, she actually put out a nice write-up about how the earthquakes traveled down from Halima'uma'u down to Pu'u'o and along the East Rift. They track it. It's scientific.
And USGS also said.
And also in 1955, PGV wasn't there. In 1960, PGV wasn't there.
One fissure erupted then? Is
no,
that right?
there was a bunch of fissures, not just one.
So USGS.
And in the 1800s, there was eruptions. There's going to be more eruptions, whether PGV is there or not.
That's right. There will be eruptions.
PGV, you know, USGS, go check up with them.
USGS.
I'll forward you that
I was
write-up.
in a room when someone asked USGS this question.
All right,
they
I'll
said
send
the
you the
lava
write-up.
looks for cracks and weak spots. And they said, are you aware of the reinjection that's been going there? And no one answered that question. And from that point on, USGS has been silent on this subject. I think it needs to be addressed.
Okay, USGS, in my opinion, have provided a sound scientific explanation about this 2018 eruption. You know, so I'd be happy to share that report with you.
I've seen that. I'm not saying you caused the eruption. I'm saying the location and the intensity could well have been influenced by the reinjection you've been doing. And it has not been disproven. It has not been objectively analyzed yet.
We've actually done a study of the effects of groundwater from geothermal operations for 20 years. In fact, the community wanted the USGS from Menlo Park in California to do the study. That was commissioned by the county, and the results were that there was no effect that geothermal had on the groundwater. So now you're saying maybe it affected the eruption.
I'm talking about your are you aware of the tough study that just studied the reinjection?
No, I'd like to see it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, well, we have a lot more to talk about. We have about a minute left. In that time, I would love for you to answer sort of where, as the utility, where you think this should go next. You're a little bit farther back, so obviously these two are going to exchange some emails on this subject. But in all seriousness, are you comfortable with them opening in a year from now? Are you comfortable with the utility purchasing that power?
Well, that's a tough question for me to answer. Our purview, what I said earlier, is we are reliant on all of the producers of energy that we buy power from, and we're reliant on them to be there for us, to be able to give us the energy we need to serve all of our customers. For them to be able to do that reliably and safely. Because if they aren't successful, if they are at risk from whatever, then they will not be there to serve us, and then we will not be able to serve our customers. So it's a very high-level answer, but we're working. We have a rebuild agreement that we signed with PGV back in March, and it basically just governs our ability to rebuild power lines, to reconnect the plant at PGV's cost.
Okay.
And we're just going to take it from there, and
we're going to have to leave it there.
Until the next show.
Right, exactly right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we of course thank our guests, Michael Kalikini, Senior Director for Hawaii Affairs at Puna Geothermal Venture, Scott Siu, Senior Vice President of Public Affairs for the Hawaiian Electric Company, Henry Curtis, Vice President of Life of the Land and Puna Pono Alliance, and Russell Rudderman, the Hawaii State Senator who represents all of the District of Puna and the town of Pahala. Next week on Insights, hurricane season starts a little more than a week from now and runs through November, so are you ready? Join us for discussion on how to be best prepared. I'm Yenji Denise for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Ahui ho.